Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day as we get things started here. And hey, this is the second to last show of this year. I really want to drive that point home just to make sure all of you completely understand why there will be no new shows next week. Because, hey, Computer America, we take that entire week off, and then we are back at it January 2nd, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is probably a Tuesday, I think. Somewhere in there. Yes, Tuesday. So yeah, the following Tuesday we'll be back. But, hey, today, tomorrow, all new shows. And today's show is actually, hey, one of your guys' favorite. I know that for sure. And joining us is, once again, the man himself, Marcel Gagnè, and yeah, he does everything Linux with us. This is our Cooking with Linux segment where we borrow our local resident Linux expert and talk all things Linux, be it new distributions, be it news, rumors, tips, things like that. And hey, we always have a lot of fun doing it. So, but before we do that, a couple of things to mention, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes, which Marcel does a great job every single month of making sure that the show notes reflect exactly what we talk about here today on the show. So if you're driving, if you're busy, if you're working, well, hey, don't worry. We have you covered right there on our homepage. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest, which we will have a new winner tomorrow. And that is brought to you by Logitech. And then the last thing is, of course, the live video stream, where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. Always a lot of fun, and you can check that out. But hey, we're still a radio show. And yeah, so with that being said, I think we're just going to go ahead and bring our guest on and, hey, get things started because we never seem to have enough time. So once again, joining us, Marcel Gagnè, Cooking with Linux, and of course, long history of working with Linux. No one else better. And so, Marcel, thank you for coming on to Computer America once again.
Well, thanks for having me on Computer America. It's great to be here every month.
Yeah, our pleasure.
To kibitz, chat, and otherwise hang out with you.
Absolutely. No, but you come on and you talk about just everything and anything that has to do with Linux and Linux, which is kind of hard. I think you really do pick good topics, but Linux is such a fractured. It has a negative connotation to it. Very community that it's hard to really capture what's going on with Linux month to month.
Well, it's getting harder all the time in some ways because I've said this before, but Linux has become invisible. I mean, it's everywhere in everything everybody does, to the point that we almost have to talk about things like desktop Linux, because it's kind of the thing that's still on the fringes, that makes it interesting for people to try and play with, because I mean Linux is everywhere. It's in your thermostat, it's in your television, it's in your smart home devices. It runs the internet. It's if you have a smartwatch, it's in your smartwatch. It's everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. Android phones run Linux. Run a Linux kernel at the base. So I mean, there is literally no place in the internet and connected world where Linux is not felt.
Right.
So it's everywhere, baby.
And by the way, maybe I'll have something to actually contribute in future Linux shows, because I'm actually planning to, because I know that a lot of Arduino boards, Raspberry Pis, things like that, they don't run full-blown Windows 10, obviously. It would just cripple the little guys. And we're actually building a new recording studio here at Computer America. And cool. And since I'm starting with a clean slate, blank room, I wanted to inject as much smart technology as I could, and that's going to involve multiple Raspberry Pis. So hey, maybe maybe we can revisit the issue of, these little tiny cheap computers that can, smartify, basic things.
Like that smartify.
I have not seen that before, but it's the word that came into.
We're gonna coin that word today. We're gonna coin that.
Absolutely.
Ben. That's your word.
Absolutely. But yeah, and of course I'm looking forward to that. But as for today's show, you have the show notes here. They're typed up. They're ready to go if people want to
They're
follow
typed up.
along.
Yeah,
And
I just for anybody who's listening out there, I want to try a social experiment. Okay, I want everybody to start using the word smartify when talking about things. Okay, this is the word that we're going to use today, and I'm going to try to use it several times in the course of this discussion, just so that we can spread it. Okay.
see, and here's my problem. I've never been original. I've never been creative, and to say that smartify is my word is I'm sure I heard it before from some startup that came up on here. But yeah, okay, fine. Smartify, it's a thing now, folks. Use it. Smartify your lives. And so with
just sorry, I'm just going to digress. I know we should be talking about important Linux things, but selfies. You know what selfies are, of course.
Absolutely.
The guy who's credited, and I can't think of his name at the moment. The guy who's credited with coming up with the word selfie, okay, was interviewed multiple times, and this is a couple of years ago now, I think. Well, anyway, he was interviewed by places as you're the person who invented the word selfie. He of course went on record saying, honestly, I'm pretty sure that I may be the first one to use the term. I don't actually know, but I may have heard other my friends and I may have been using the term. I don't know, but nevertheless, his is the first recorded use of that. So perhaps yours is the first recorded use of the word smartify.
There we go. I like that. So we'll keep that. We'll archive it, and we'll keep it in our pocket. But again, getting back onto track and getting back into today's topic. So tell us what the topic is and why you made it. Why you made it so.
Well, first of all, I mean, the topic is it's December 21st. It's like Christmas is just a few days away, which terrifies me, by the way. But Christmas is just a few days away. So I decided that today's wine would be eggnog. All right. So
there we go.
In honor of Christmas, today's wine is eggnog. And in particular, I'm drinking this guy here. See, I've even got it in a bottle, so it looks like, this is the wine for today. The wine for today is President's Choice rich and creamy candy cane eggnog. It's got a little bit of a candy cane, sweetness to it. A little bit of that peppermint flavor mixed into the eggnog. It's actually good eggnog. It actually is. And because I'm a grown up and I can do that, I'm mixing it with a little Mount Gay rum. So little rum and eggnog on the show. In honor of Christmas. Shall we sing, Ben?
Shall we sing? No one. And there you go. There's the last of the people leaving that room. But it's well, you did rum, but I had coworkers a little while ago that I told them, they're like, well, what do we spike our eggnog with? Because hey, what's a Christmas party without spiked eggnog? And I was like, bourbon, and they were like, bourbon? Never tried that. Like bourbon to me was always the go-to, alcohol of choice to spike your eggnog. But you did rum, so bold choice.
Well, I don't know. I thought rum and eggnog was the thing, but there you go. Anyway,
right? Okay,
that's it. That's the wine for today. The wine for today is rum. Sorry, rum and eggnog.
And it's a great year, 2017. Great vintage of eggnog.
So, happy New Year, everybody.
All that good stuff. But your topic for this for today is the ghost of Linux past.
The ghost of Linux past, and let's just talk with a little bit of news stuff, because the news stuff is actually going to take us into the ghost of Linux past. Sure. By the way, I also included, for the people out there who do actually go through and take a look at the notes. I've got a nice picture from the Christmas Carol, the 1951 version of A Christmas Carol, originally released by the way under the name Scrooge, starring Alastair Sim. And it is like the single best version of A Christmas Carol ever released. And it's one of those movies that I have to watch every year. I mean, I love this movie. It is just, it's black and white. It's brilliantly acted. There are a couple of interesting little flubs that you notice, that once, I won't tell you because, you'll notice it every single time from here on in. But Like every time you'll notice it forever and ever, you'll be going, oh man, I wish you hadn't told me that because I see that. There's only one person in the entire movie who actually does a pathetic job of acting. Everybody else is brilliant,
Oh yeah.
especially Alastair Sim. He just makes like the best Scrooge ever of all time. So I took that, the ghost of Christmas, or in this case of Linux past, and we're going to get into that. So let's talk about the news first of all.
Sure.
So, by the way, have you seen? I mean, you must have watched the 1951 A Christmas Carol, right?
No, no.
Oh, dude.
I may have watched it, but my brain was still probably jelly, and it.
Do I need to share a YouTube link to the? I'm sure that the version that's on YouTube is not legitimately up there. There's a version of it on YouTube.
Then we should probably
In
not
all its
promote.
black and white glory.
Right, we should probably not promote that one, but I'm sure it's on one of the streaming sites out there.
I'm
Everything
sure
is.
it is. I'm sure it
Yeah.
is actually. I actually have a copy on DVD, which I've had for years now.
There you go. And
Probably had it on VHS at one time, but I still
your
have a DVD of it floating around. It's great.
your Christmas movie seems to be Scrooge. My Christmas movie is
Die Hard.
Christmas Vacation.
What
Uh,
about Die Hard? Die Hard's a Christmas movie.
it is, and people forget that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It absolutely is. But no, mine is Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase, National Lampoon's.
All right. Well, in
That's
that
our
case,
stuff.
then my second Christmas movie is actually not Die Hard, despite the fact that our the Prime Minister of Canada, was on a TV interview recently, and
Mhm.
he said that Die Hard was a Christmas movie. So there you go.
Right?
But my Christmas movie, besides Scrooge, the second one is A Christmas Story about the kid with the Red Ryder BB gun.
Hmm.
It's awesome. It's awesome, dude. I must re-educate you.
I have, and again, these are all classics. I have heard of them. It's just I haven't seen them. It's just
We will
so.
re-educate you. We will re-educate you. All right, let's jump right into it.
Right.
Hey, it's a solstice miracle, because Christmas, the solstice, Hanukkah, all these things basically focused around the solstice, which is of course the shortest, the winter solstice, which is
Right.
the shortest day of the year. That's why everybody partied at this time of year. It's because it was cold and it was dark and it was like the last day that the days were going to be this short. So everybody celebrated with lights and stuff like that and food. So that's kind of where the origins of all these holidays at this time of year come from. It's wrapped around the
Mary Saturnalia, absolutely.
so yeah, absolutely. So it's a solstice miracle. Spotify, the streaming. Speaking of streaming, the streaming music service has finally released an up-to-date Linux client. People in the Linux world have been basically using the web client, assuming, of course, they were Spotify customers and fans. I actually do use Spotify a bit, but I must say that my go-to is actually the Google Play Music service. But nevertheless, I use Spotify as well. I actually have a subscription there as well,
Mhm.
and they now have a nice new shiny Linux client. So for the people out there, we have the link, the Spotify download for Linux. I installed it yesterday, as a matter of fact, when I found out about it, and it works brilliantly. It looks nice and it works great. So thank you, Spotify, for thinking of us.
So yeah, and that always raises the question. I mean, we find that a lot of third parties, they do eventually come out with Linux applications that play nicely and all that stuff, but it does take a couple of months or weeks or in some cases years to actually get them out. I mean, is this something that the community really misses? Because I know that whatever you're looking for, there's usually a counterpart, if not official. There's something that will easily take the place of.
Yes, I know what you're saying, and that's if the company releases a excuse me, a decent API that somebody can actually build on top of.
Mm.
That's been done with things like Skype, for instance. I know that oh goodness, it must be a couple of years ago now. On the show here, we were talking about a Skype wrapper, like kind of a wraparound Skype to make it look a little nicer than what was available, called Ghetto Skype.
Right.
And it was played on the idea that that we live in the ghetto, we Linux desktop users, when it comes to some of these products. And Skype actually came through and came up with an updated client. I think about a year later or something like that. So they actually came up with something that's more up to date. And as you say, eventually it feels like that happens, but also it also feels like it's second thought. And I mean, and I can understand it from a desktop perspective. Okay. Um, the Linux desktop market share is quite small. I mean, there are, it's on par with people who run Mac OS on the desktop. I mean, but desktop operating systems, I think, are shifting a lot. And Chrome OS is actually, Chromebooks. Chrome OS is one of the things that kind of makes that very clear, because they've sort of caught on to the idea that everything happens on the web, and so many applications, especially with HTML5 now, look great on the web. Now, it's not perfect, and often HTML5 applications tend to be, how can I put this, stripped down.
Hmm.
They're not anywhere near as full featured as we might like, but it still provides a way to access the service, even though it's not a full featured way to access the service. And Skype was a perfect example of that with their was it web.skype.com? Is that right?
Yeah,
Do I have that right?
yeah, something like that. They did provide an application that you could access from any browser, but hey, because browsers have to run on any infinite combination of parts and pieces and connections and speeds. Yeah, you're right. Stripped down, you can't have all the features.
Yeah, I mean, there are some beautiful, there have been some beautiful HTML5 clients that have been released out there. But often, if you want, if you want the whole, if you want the real experience, it's like you desire some kind of a desktop client. That is, of course, shifting as more and more people live in the mobile world. But there you go. I mean, that's an example of something that people have been waiting for a couple of years for, and I welcome it. I'm happy to see it. So
Very cool. Very, very cool. So, and I don't think there's much more to to kind of speak to that.
no, I
Uh,
mean,
we're good. So Spotify on Linux, all that good stuff. Great. Is this only for a particular distribution or anything that runs a
it's.
particular?
I know that it's being released, as I understand it, it's being released as a Snap. We talked about Snap on the show before, haven't we?
Wow, I am totally drawing a blank if we did.
Okay. In that case, then, if we didn't talk about Snap on the show, um, you know, knock on my head, in a couple of weeks or so when New Year rolls around and say, Marcel, next time we need to talk about snaps.
Sure.
Anyway, snaps are first of all, the code for Snap is being distributed on pretty much any modern distribution, and I suppose this is where this is where I say yes, I've switched Linux distributions again.
Good.
Yep,
Nope.
yep, I did it. It's happened again. I think I spent about 2.5-3 months on Manjaro,
Hmm.
um, and frankly, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of cool doing things in a different way, but there were things that just annoyed the hell out of me, to be perfectly honest. And so I couldn't wait around for things to work the way that I wanted them to work. So I'm back on the latest version of Kubuntu 17.10, which is the artful aardvark. Yes, we're back at A. We've gone all the way through to Z or Z,
Hmm.
and now we're back at A with artful aardvark. 17.10 is the release, which means it was released in the 10th month of 2017.
There
So
we
there
go.
you go.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm running Artful, and I was able to download it perfectly. And Snap comes pre-installed on, like I said, on modern distributions like Kubuntu 17.10. But what Snap is they're packages of software that includes all the necessary prerequisites are bundled into the package. So technically, or snaps tend to be bigger than installed programs because or typical installed programs, because if I install something like well, let's use Spotify as an example. They distributed a for Ubuntu, they had an Ubuntu deb, like a package, an Ubuntu package, and it takes into consideration that certain other things are installed on my Ubuntu system, or my Kubuntu system in this case. With snaps work on the premise that I have no idea what version you're running on. I have no idea which distribution it is, and I honestly don't care.
Hmm.
I don't care if you've got all the supporting stuff, because I'm going to distribute the package with all the things necessary to run it. Okay. And it's kind of a neat idea. And snaps have been increasing in popularity a lot as time goes on. And there are more and more snaps all the time. And places are starting to think of that as a good way to put it out, because you only need to make one version Uh, I can think of one person out there who's cringing as I'm going to use the words Java, but it's kind of like in some ways it's kind of like the Java philosophy of write once, run anywhere. Well, in this case, it's not written. It doesn't require something like Java. It just says, okay, it's a little package. It's a little package with everything that's necessary to run it. So it's not like you need something like Java to run it on the outside. You just need the proper installer to bring it into your system to then let it work. So that's what Snap is in a nutshell. That's the short version.
I got you. No, that seems very, very helpful because I can't tell you how many times, I've downloaded things and it's like, oh, you need the latest version of Adobe Acrobat. And it's like, but I don't even use that for anything ever. But apparently this program
Exactly.
does. So, no,
Exactly. And the beauty about this, of course, is let's face it. I mean, we have, I know that, one of the things that is pointed out in terms of a plus for Linux distributions is there are distributions that are built for systems that don't have a lot of horsepower, which means you can use like an old PC or an old notebook or something like that and run a Linux distribution, run a nice desktop that gives you the tools that you need to work and access the internet and so forth. But like I said, you don't have to have the latest and greatest. You can use some old hardware to do that. Now, the fact, however, is that anybody who has bought a PC in the last couple of years has a lot of horsepower to spare.
hmm
Okay. The one I'm working on at the moment here, I know it's just got a Core i5, but it has a 2 gig GeForce NVIDIA card on it. It has 12 gigabytes of RAM. It's a speedy little notebook with tons and tons of disk space and memory. So the idea that I have to be careful about using the space as efficiently as possible stops mattering after a while. It's like, yeah, I got tons of space.
That and that is something that we've seen in the security space that people are taking advantage of. I'm not sure how fond you are of Bitcoin mining, but we're finding hackers and people who are ne'er do wells will actually harness that extra power that you're talking about that people just don't use, and they'll use for their own devious ends. I mean, it happens every day.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm sorry to say that you're right. It actually does. There are better ways to use the free cycles on your PC, by the way. And one of them is you remember the SETI at Home program, right?
Send me at home. Wait,
SETI,
maybe.
SETI. The search for
Oh yeah,
the
yeah, yes.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Anyway, yeah, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Anyway, it basically used spare cycles to work your way through um, the
Radio signals, I think,
yeah, the
from the
radio to
SETI
try and look for
satellites.
alien
Right, or,
signals.
yeah.
Like a brilliant, brilliant idea. There's also another package. There's a package called BOINC, which is a terrible name, but the project is uh, is designed to do things like crunch proteins and look for. So
That's
what
the
you
one
do,
I signed up for. Yeah.
yeah, to look for cures for cancer and things like that. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. If anybody wants to look this up, maybe I should add this in the show notes as well. The World Community Grid. World Community Grid. The fact is, you can't, I mean, if you want to mine Bitcoins, unless you've got like phenomenal hardware, there's no way to make money on this anymore. There's absolutely no way. Most people, and in fact, the cost of the energy necessary to mine a single coin is now more than you can make on a coin. So it's just
Right.
not worth it anymore. So, unless you're, like you said, a ne'er do well who basically steals from everybody's spare cycles, why not take the spare cycles? After all, it's the holiday season, it's the season of giving.
Right.
Use the spare cycles to do things like I said, crunch proteins, look for cures for Alzheimer or cancer or something like that. Like I said, I'll put it in the show notes, but it's the World Community Grid, www.worldcommunitygrid, all one word, .org.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
And, you want to find a cure for childhood cancer, for leukemia, for stuff like that, help out. Take those spare cycles from your computer. Give up on the crazy idea that you're going to become a Bitcoin billionaire, because you aren't. And, do something good with those spare cycles. So there you
Right.
go.
Well, no,
That's my
you're absolutely right, and I definitely do like the protein folding one. That one was always caught my attention. And yeah, hey, what's better than giving without actually having to do anything? But you do make a big difference. So,
It is, and it is a wonderful thing that you can do that costs you absolutely nothing, and it's just it's while your system is doing nothing in the background.
all it costs you, to be fair, is that little bit of electricity that it would take to run your computer. But even that is minuscule compared to daily use. So, absolutely.
All
So,
right, I'm putting this in the show notes. I'm putting it in right now, in fact.
all
So
right,
that's,
yeah, absolutely. You go ahead and do that. And by the way, you said that you switched back to
oh
Kubuntu
yes.
1710. And by the way, when you switch back from all these different distributions, do you ever like land back on Kubuntu and just be like, well, this is normal and maybe too normal?
Well, yeah, kind of actually. I do. I mean, well, you just pointed out for one thing that I land back on Kubuntu. Um, a lot of, I mean, distributions tend to be focused on about three major ones, to be perfectly honest. I know Arch Linux is a player, and that's what Manjaro was. It's based on Arch Linux. But the biggies out there, the biggies are Red Hat.
Hmm.
Okay, Red Hat slash Fedora slash CentOS, all RPM based distributions. And in fact, that's going to fit well into my distribution focus for the day. And there are Debian based distributions like Debian, for instance, the obvious one. But there are a lot of Debian based distributions besides Ubuntu slash Kubuntu, and Lubuntu and Xubuntu and all the Buntus that exist out there. Ubuntu just happens to have a very involved, very big user community. So if you are looking for somebody to, sort of, be there with information, anything in the Ubuntu's, starting at ubuntu.org or kubuntu.org is a great place to start because there are so many people who use it. One of the pieces of advice I've given over the years is somebody says, well, which Linux distribution should I use? And I occasionally go back to, well, use the one that your friends are using. If you've got a friend who's using a particular distribution, use that one.
Hmm.
Why? Because then you've got somebody to talk to who is running the same thing that you're running. And even Linux Mint, Linux Mint is a real favorite as if you'll pardon the expression, beginner Linux distribution. But the fact is, Linux Mint is built on Ubuntu. I mean, it uses the Ubuntu repositories in the background, and there are lots of distributions like that do the same thing. So Linux is nothing if not a community that that shares expertise, that shares code, that shares knowledge. So and that shows up particularly in these types of distributions. So yes, I do occasionally go back to Kubuntu, but I've also gone back. I mean, I've gone back to Linux Mint.
Hmm.
I've gone back to KDE Neon, which is also an Ubuntu-based distribution. So it's kind of hard to not run into those big ones, in some way, shape, or form, even if it's under a different banner, so to speak.
Right. I gotcha. No, makes perfect sense. But hey, maybe in a couple months you'll be back with another one, a different one, and hey, we'll rave about that one.
We will. Well, one of the things that makes it easy to do, and I I'll just throw this out as a quick piece of advice, and I guess I'm sort of watching the clock as well. But as a quick piece of advice, if you build your PC, okay, with a separate system partition and a separate data
Hmm.
partition, or what's called a home partition. Home is where your personal stuff is, as opposed to the system stuff is. Then going to a different distribution is as simple as you don't reformat your home partition because that's where your stuff is, where your data is. Now, please do backups anyway. Please, please, please do backups. Just do it.
Hmm.
Okay? Make sure you do backups. All right, now that I've got that out of the way. So the home partition stays there untouched. You don't format it. What you do is you reformat the root partition, which is where your new distribution gets installed. And then you just mount the home partition back on top of it. So me switching to a different distribution is, it takes half an hour. Like it takes the time that that it takes me to burn something onto a CD or onto a USB, a USB drive, reboot my PC, let it install, and then I boot it back up. I log back into my stuff. Nothing is touched. Everything is exactly where it was, and yeah, that's
You you you
so
find your
much easier than that.
Yeah, you find yourself in a completely different environment. So, hey, but Marcel, thank you, by the way, for watching the clock. But just real quick, for when we come back, would you like to move on to Google Home and all
Oh
that
yeah,
goodies?
okay. Well, Google Home is going to touch on the whole security privacy thing.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about artificial intelligence and about AI and robots and stuff like that on the show. I know it's one of my touchstone topics. But of course,
and Marcel, I know that you can't hear, but the music means we're going to take a break. We'll be right back in just a minute. Everyone, Marcel Gagnè, Cooking with Linux. Everyone, stay tuned. Computer America.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour, and we continue on with our Cooking with Linux segment. This is our monthly show where we dedicate the entire thing to different topics of Linux. And hey, you may find yourself wondering where to get started. And hey, Marcel comes up with a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is that, well, hey, no secret that Google definitely utilizes Linux in a lot of its, in a lot of its applications. And now we're about to move on to one of Google's applications, and that is, well, Marcel, you were about to touch on it, but home security, privacy, and, well, let's face it, you just bugged your home. So talk about that. And you paid for it. And you paid for it.
Should I say it? Should I say it? God, I hope Google isn't evil.
Absolutely.
I think it is one of the lines I utter most often. I know. God, I hope they're not evil. Anyway, we've talked about intelligent assistants. In fact, I spent we had one show where I did like 3 or 4 different open source versions on a Raspberry Pi, just so that so that was, just to see where the open source versions of these things are going. And of course, you can download the code for Alexa if you wanted and build into a Raspberry Pi. And I did that as well with limited success. It's not the most ideal format for that sort of thing. But this season, as all the great deals went on, in the States, you guys have got the whole Black Friday extravaganza. Well, they figured out up here that, people might decide to actually shop in the US. So they do the same thing up here. They lower the prices, they have deals. And of course, they had deals on the Google Home product. And I figured, hey, I've been wanting one for a long time. This is the time to buy it. So I had a Google Home. I'm looking at it over there. Hey, Google, what time is it?
I don't think it'll tell. Isn't it okay?
Actually, it told me, but you can't hear it.
Yeah, not.
But anyway, I wasn't sure whether you'd be able to hear it from here, but it doesn't matter. The point is, so I've got this intelligent assistant, which you can ask stupid questions like what time it is, but I tend to use it as a service for playing music, as I'm sure a lot of people do. I come into the kitchen in the morning, I'm making breakfast for the kids, and, I ask it for the day's news. So it plays my favorite newscasts. It tells me the weather for today, things I'm supposed to remember before the day is out, because it's got my to-do list on it. It's got my shopping list. I mean, it's one of those handy little things that, I don't have to reach for my phone every time, because of course my phone does have the Google Assistant on it. So yes, I bugged my home. In fact, we bugged it in a big way. We've got 3 Google Homes at the moment. There are 2 minis in the house and one of the standard, the one that's about yay big.
Right.
The regular one. And I have to admit, the idea of being able to just say, play me some music wherever I am at any given moment, without having to whip out a phone and listen to it on tinny speakers, is absolutely fantastic. I would, in the end, I would have paid it just for that, because it's so handy.
And that's the interesting part, where Google they have decided that that is where I think a lot of people see it coming into their home first, where it's not so much about automating thermostat lighting, your front door. They see it as music, and that would explain why they did come out with the Google Home Max as well. So
Absolutely. In other words, a much bigger speaker with much bigger sound. Now, I haven't actually, I don't have one of those, and I
right,
haven't tried that. But
not many do.
but
Yeah.
yeah, convenient music. I mean, there's nothing like it. It's wonderful, and I don't have a radio in the kitchen anymore. In fact, I also use it to listen to local radio because I can pull up radio stations on it. Say, tune in a particular tune in radio station, and
Yeah.
everything is connected that way. Now, I'm not particularly worried about, I understand that there are privacy concerns, and I haven't gone into this blind. I'm reasonably knowledgeable when it comes to the issues that surround these things. But the fact is, I have been willing to give up portions of my privacy for convenience, as have many of us for many years now. If you have a smartphone.
I mean, just real quick, Marcel, you were the one who brought up the topic of, I believe you were the one about surveillance, or the one that where essentially, I'm sorry.
Surveillance, yes.
Surveillance. That's it. Where essentially everyone gives up all privacy, and therefore everyone can watch each other, and it's a better way to go than trying to protect things. Because you're right, through smartphones and other things, we've given up, just privacy altogether. And I really, I get that was an idea. I get that could have been a way to go. But ever since 2017, and you said that wow, it's December already, and I was thinking the opposite, where finally this year is coming to an end because so many things have happened.
Oh,
It's dragged on. And the idea that your privacy is private, between all the hacking that we talk about on the show, between
yeah.
all of the data that's collected that we talk about on the show. I mean, at this point, surveillance, it's here whether you like it or not. And
Well,
there's really
and
not much reason
it
to
starts to sound
assume
like a
privacy.
good idea.
Yeah.
The
Mm,
watchers, the watchers don't. It's not just the watchers watching you. You get to watch the watchers as well. So that's the idea.
right. And so that's why I find myself as well warming up to the idea of having a digital assistant that maybe potentially is listening 24/7. But I know that it doesn't really matter because they're not really watching you. They just want, they're using data to extract what they want. They're not really, it's like, did you hear what Marcel had for breakfast? Eggs. He fixed his kids' eggs. And they don't care, but they are listening. It's just, what are they listening for? And it's
Well,
usually nothing. Yeah.
what it's listening for is a hot word to activate the connection. And you can test this out, by the way, by by turning off your router and then using the magic words, okay, followed by, or in this case, hey, followed by Google. You can do that and you'll find that it still listens to you, but it says, I can't help you with anything at the moment because I'm not connected to the internet. So it's really only listening, like it doesn't go buggy at the time. It's only listening for the hot word, at which point it listens for you to say something. And it doesn't listen all the time. It's listening for the hot word, but there's no data being transmitted past a certain point. And if you don't believe that, you can basically say the magic words to turn it on and then start, and then just don't say anything for a while. And then, don't say anything for 15 seconds and then ask your question. And you'll notice that it doesn't answer because you took too long. It's actually shut off
Mm,
the engine that communicates to the internet at that point. So you have to put, whether you like it or not, you have to put some kind of trust in the company that provides the service, because it's not just the hardware, it's the service that's built into the hardware. And you have to believe you have to believe it if you're going to introduce the spy into your house, as I think you referred to it.
right.
If you're going to introduce it into your house, you have to be willing to believe that it is, it's at least somewhat ethical in the
Right.
way that it listens.
Right. And we've only seen that in a lot of cases, Google only uses the data. So far, they haven't used it to incriminate anyone. They haven't used it to, say that, hey, we were able to find this treasure trove of golden bullions because this guy was talking about it and we overheard him. The only thing that they do it for is like, oh, turns out this people asked about, some curtains for their bedroom, and now we show them curtains on their web browser. Like that's about as far as Google likes to take it. So
It's pretty, yeah. When you come right down to it, a lot of this is really, really pretty boring. It's like, I'm sorry, but most of your day-to-day life is of no interest to anyway. Okay,
absolutely.
whatever you may be posting on Facebook. Speaking of security
Speaking
and
of
privacy,
security, go for it.
you remember Librem 5? We talked about this Kickstarter for
A
uh,
phone.
yeah, security focused phone from Purism, PURI.SM. And they had a Kickstarter where they were trying to raise like $1.5 million, and they got it. They did a fabulous job, and they got their money, and they're going to be producing this security focused piece of hardware. And again, for people that are curious about it, go to PURI.SM or just Google Librem 5 or look at the show notes, because the information is in there as well. There is a new project on the horizon, which, and in fact, I have Gail Duval, the man behind it, reached out to me and let me know about it, and I want to tell you about it because it's really kind of interesting in the way that he's doing it, and like Purism and Librem and stuff like that, he's concerned about just his personal privacy. The fact he kind of came to the conclusion that he doesn't really like the fact that Google has everything on him.
Hmm.
That basically his entire world is in the Google ecosystem. And I get that. I actually do, despite the fact that, like I said, I'm going into this with my eyes open. I get it. I really do. And I still make local backups of all my stuff, despite the fact that, Google Photos has all my photos, and, Google Docs has my documents. I still have all this stuff locally, on my PC and on my network drive here in the house, just because I still want to be in control of that information. So instead of creating a whole new device, Gail has decided that, and his company, by the way, is EELO, EELO.io. Again, the link is in the show notes for people who are curious on that. And he is running a Kickstarter. They're not looking for anything like $1.5 million, because what Gail is trying to do is, and his company is trying to do, is build a custom ROM that is security and privacy focused. So instead of building a whole device from the ground up, he's saying, look, I know that a lot of people out there have phones already, have Android phones, and let's face it, there's a really active community of people who install custom ROMs on their phones. I've been installing custom ROMs for years, and I actually just got a new phone a few days ago. Curse you, my Nexus 6P, who went into the dreaded hardware boot loop. Curse you, because
Right.
my warranty was up, but my contract wasn't up, and I had to buy it out. Curse you, Nexus 6P.
All
But
right.
anyway, now I have a Pixel 2, which is kind of awesome, actually. I am loving it, and I haven't custom ROMmed it, but I'm quite sure that I will at some point, because I've done it with everything else since then. But I digress. So what ELO is going to do is they're going to produce a custom ROMs built on Lineage OS. Do you know what Lineage OS is?
I do not. Probably.
Yeah. You remember Cyanogen Mod? Does that ring a bell?
No.
No, so you're not a phone modder or an Android phone modder.
I the phone that I get is the phone that I get through work and through Computer America, and Craig, being the head honcho, yeah, I've been on iPhone.
Touch your phone.
I've been on iPhone for X amount of years because it's what I get. So I have not had
iPhones typically aren't modded. I mean, it's an ecosystem that is not particularly friendly to modding.
exactly.
So, but in the Android world, because we're living in the open source world, truly living in the open source world, despite the fact that Apple uses a lot of open source technology, they're not exactly open. Whereas in the Android community, that is a heck of a lot easier. And in fact, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that Google encourages this, but Google has put themselves in a situation where they have embraced the open source model, and by embracing the open source model, they've basically opened the door for people to do these things. And I appreciate that, by the way. It's one of the things that lets me sleep at night thinking that maybe they aren't evil. Anyway, but I digress again.
Mhm.
So anyway, so Lineage OS is based on CyanogenMod. It's what Lineage OS is now, what that was. And it's an ongoing development of a project that's really quite mature, frankly. It is a very mature custom ROM group that produces custom ROMs for a huge variety of phones, like a ton of phones. So if you don't like, if for instance, let's say that your phone is a couple of years old, it's still a great phone. It's a couple of years old, but the company that you got it from hasn't released a new version of the Android operating system, and they're not going to because they don't really care. You
Right.
know, what they care about is producing the next phone. And I'm sorry, but we gave it to you with this stuff on it. Well, Lineage OS lets you extend the lineage, if you will, of your phone by giving you a more modern version of the Android operating system, even if and when your provider, the company that you bought your phone from doesn't do it for
You
you.
know, and oh, getting a little bit of a feedback. Let's see, where's that coming from?
Mhm.
But yeah, sorry about that. But one
Oh,
thing that I definitely wanted to mention was that this is something that Apple admitted to yesterday, and I know this is all about Linux, and we're supposed to be focusing on Linux, but
yes.
Apple did admit to this yesterday that they do actually slow down the processor speed of older phones. As in, if you wonder why, if you update to the latest iOS, which they pretty much force you to, like let's say if you updated just recently and you have an
Yep.
iPhone 6, they do purposefully slow down the processor speed, and your phone does get slower through software enforcement. That's
Yep.
something that Apple does. And I guess in an Android world, that's something that they really don't do or even try to do.
Yeah, well, they don't do it and they don't try to do it. I understand why Apple does this, by the way. I don't like it.
Right.
Uh, I think it's wrong, but I understand why they do it. And it's not just to force you to buy a new phone. It's just so that your old phone can continue to not die with the software that's being updated on it.
Right.
They're trying to maintain the experience somewhat, but they do it at the cost of performance. Anyway, just to so Elo is an interesting idea, and they have a Kickstarter. And again, if you want eelo.io, check it out. They will be producing a custom Lineage OS ROM, or several of them. They're going to support a handful of phones at the beginning, but presumably more and more as time goes on with this security and privacy focused version of an Android custom ROM. So I encourage everybody to go check it out. I think it's a worthwhile project. I like the idea that it doesn't require you to buy a specific piece of hardware. I
Mm-hmm.
think that as a longtime Linux user, I like that idea. Let me buy the hardware I want, and then let me do what I want with the hardware that I want. So it works with my thing. Now, Gil Duval, by the way, just to
Yeah.
take that a little
Who is
further,
that guy?
that guy is the guy who started Mandrake Linux.
I've heard of
So
that.
he does have real open source pedigree, so to speak. He created Mandrake Linux, which at the beginning got beat up a little bit. I loved Mandrake. I ran Mandrake for years, and in fact, I wrote a lot of columns that used Mandrake as the basis for the stuff that I was writing. Um, Mandrake was got beat up at the beginning as being just Red Hat repackaged, and what he was trying to do was, in some ways, what Linux Mint does now. Like nobody beats up Linux Mint for being, Ubuntu repackaged,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time it was a big deal. It's like, hey, you're just Red Hat with a pretty face. Well, yeah, but eventually Mandrake diverted and changed, and eventually became Mandriva when the Mandrake the Magician people got upset about the idea that his distribution was called Mandrake, and even had like a magic wand sitting on it. So there was they're saying, hey, you're appropriating our logo, and I guess he kind of thought Mandrake is a long time ago, and nobody really remembers that except but nevertheless. But Mandrake Linux was a really, really cool distribution. So Gail Duval is the guy who put it together and who championed it for many, many years. So, like I said, he's got real clout. He's got real experience in the Linux world, and I think it's worth watching him for that reason. Now, since I'm talking about Mandrake, and I called this the ghost of Linux past, my distribution focus today is going to be old Linux distributions.
Okay.
Now, what's really neat is there are, like I said, as you know, there are hundreds of Linux distributions, like tons of them, right?
Yeah.
It's if you want to have a little bit of fun and you've got some kind of a virtual machine program, or you've got KVM, QEMU KVM, like anybody who's got a modern Linux distribution on their PC is going to have that. Or let's say you've got VirtualBox or, whatever the equivalent is in the Mac world. You could download distributions and just run them just to see what they look like. You can install them in a virtual machine if you like, or if it's a distribution that allows you to run a live one, and the original Mandrake would not, just for the record. This is a really neat way to go back and see just how much Linux has changed over the years. Remember, the first kernel was released back in 1991, right? So this is a long time ago. Now, on July 23rd, 1998, Mandrake Linux, Gail Duval's baby, was released at version 5.1. The reason it was called version 5.1 is because at the time that would have been the version of Red Hat Linux. So, there was no bones made about the fact that it was based on that. And, just like I said, Red Hat Linux with a pretty face, so to speak. Anyway, if you want to get an early version of it, okay, or an early version of anything else, there's a great site called Old Linux Distributions. What's the site called? Is it called Old Linux?
Old-linux.com.
Yeah, old-linux.com. The site is Old Versions of Linux. That's what the site is called,
Right.
Old Versions of Linux. And they track them through the years. So if you actually go visit the site, and I don't know if you've got it up on the screen there for people to take a look at, they start at 1998 with the 32-bit PC distributions being released, and they've got Red Hat 5.1 as well as Mandrake 5.1. Remember what I said? It was based on that, so the version numbers were the same at the time. Then we go to 1999, Mandrake 5.3, Mandrake 6.0, which comes out later the year in 1999. Corel Linux. If you want to take a look and see what Corel was the company behind WordPerfect. For anybody who remembers the WordPerfect word processor with some fondness, as I do. Corel Linux. I actually ran Corel Linux as well. I tried it out way back once upon a time. And then as time goes on, you see the other distributions start coming out, like the Debian distribution starts to appear. They actually have FreeBSD stuff on the site there, on the old Linux site as well. Then Red Hat, later versions of Red Hat, and then Fedora starts to appear, and the first Ubuntu start to appear. And it's really kind of neat to go back and take a look at some of these things. You won't find everything there. If you want to actually dig a little tiny bit deeper than that, there are a couple of FTP sites out there that have ancient Linux distributions that you can check out. And I believe I gave you at least one of them, ftp.riken.go.jp.
Right.
/Linux has distributions of all types, and then the various versions underneath that you can download and check out. It's really kind of a cool time machine of what's happening or what was happening in the Linux world. And like I said, in the show notes, I've got a couple of screenshots of what it looked like to install a Linux distribution, specifically Mandrake 5.1.
And it is glorious.
He makes no bones about it, because if you take a look at that first screenshot, it actually says Linux Mandrake in brackets based on Red Hat Linux.
I see that.
Yeah, you see that from the screenshot? And I've got a second screenshot there. Oops, I haven't inserted the second screenshot. You fool, Marcel. Anyway, I'll show you the second screenshot. The second screenshot has a picture of the login screen. So just to show you how much has changed over the years. And then you'd log in and you'd type the magic word start X to go into a graphical desktop. I mean, it didn't even log in. It didn't even boot up to a graphical desktop. It booted up to text, and then you typed in start X to start your graphical desktop. So those were definitely the days.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're looking at the screenshot you have here of Linux Mandrake, and it's like, the total bytes that this thing is measured in 250 megabytes, which, what is that? Like,
Yeah, it's kind of amazing actually to take a look at it, because like I said, the screenshot not only shows little tiny bits, but like the swap partition, which was like extra memory in case your system didn't have a lot of memory. Okay, if you take a look at the screenshot, or if you go through the install process, and I did this morning as a force of habit, I've got tons of memory, so I remember that back then it didn't take an awful lot of. Understanding that, of course, I'm going to give it 512 meg of RAM for swap, and it comes up and says, "I'm sorry, but we can only handle 127 meg of RAM."
You gave it too much. You over allocated.
Oh man, yeah, and of course foolishly I went and typed 128 because I'm in multiples of 2 here, right? Powers of 2. So I typed 128 and he goes, no, 127.
And really, I mean, so you say that these, pieces of Linux pass, like, so this is like some kind of internet archive, but for Linux, and being able to go back and people are saving them.
Well, yeah, they're saving them, and it's kind of. I mean, and they're all free. They're all they're all available. There's nothing stopping you from going out and checking some of these. And I will be honest with you, I have actually gone into a customer now. The last time this happened was a couple of years ago, but I went to see a customer who had an old, and I mean old system that had a custom application that they'd written for this specific system, and I had to get my hands on a Red Hat 5.1, like Red Hat 5.1 distribution to reinstall on an old PC for this customer.
Mm-hmm.
So this does happen. Not often.
Yeah, luckily not often. Luckily not often. So, but with that being said, though, Marcel, we have like 2 or 3 minutes left, and I was wondering if you wanted to. Well, let's see, what is this? Chaos X. What is this?
Oh, no. Refresh your screen there because I've been updating the show notes as we go. Because I do that. I update them while we're talking.
There we go. Check it. Yeah, now I have to refresh, and I did. So, yeah, look, a penguin. Nice. Okay.
All right, there you go. That's the login screen. I wanted to give you the login screen.
I gotcha.
Below that, you'll notice that there's this is an article that I found which ties in very nicely with, the ghosts of Linux past. And it's an article that talks about a whole bunch of Linux distributions that were up and coming, looked really interesting, and then just went poof, it just vanished.
I see that.
Discontinued unexpectedly. It's a fun article to read. It's again for not in terms of the brilliance, although I'm sure it's all brilliant, but because it talks on a bunch of things that you may never have heard of. It's like old distributions. It's like, really, what the heck was this stuff? And like Fuduntu, which was a distribution based on Fedora, which was supposed to be like a cross between Fedora and Ubuntu. And like, just a whole bunch of different things. And I know that I've brought up some like really bizarre Linux distributions, like things like Satanic Linux and so forth. Anyway, I think there's like half a dozen or something like that distributions that they take a look at, that came up and it was somebody's pet project and then just disappeared. So something to check out just for fun.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
And because it's the holidays, what is the holiday season about? Tell me, what's this holiday season really about?
Oh, peace on earth.
No. It's about toys.
Toys, of course.
It's about presents. It's about gifts.
All right.
Come on. Work with me. Work with me. That's the truth of Christmas. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this, aren't I? I mean, like, you are going to get hate mail like crazy.
It'll be okay. So yeah.
Like, I never want to hear that guy again because Christmas blasphemy. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, toys, kids, come on. Kids love Christmas because it's toy time. I've got 3 sites here for you. Maybe I'll add a couple more before I close things up here, but I've got 3 sites for you. One of them is one of my very favorites, is the one right at the beginning, Gaming on Linux. Okay. GamingOnLinux.com is like everything you want to know about, games that are hot, things that people have tried. This is a site that works really, really hard just for the sheer purpose of giving you fun on Linux. So I highly recommend that you check that one out, GamingOnLinux.com. I'll throw another one at you. Boiling Steam, originally inspired by Steam powered, and it's not affiliated with Steam, just for the record, but it was originally inspired by all the games that were available for Linux on Steam. So Boiling Steam is a good site to check out for that. And then, of course, another one that is a great place to go take a look if you want to dig deep into Linux games and Linux gaming is the Linux Game Database. That one's relatively easy. LGDB, linuxgamedb.org. So lgdb.org for more, just kind of this collection of games that are available in the Linux world. So there you go.
I got you. And unfortunately, the music means that we are just wrapping up here. So, and by the way, there is one more question in the show notes. What's the correct time to start playing Christmas music? Answer: after Thanksgiving. When's a good time to stop? January 2nd. There you go. There's your answers. I'm glad I can answer that for you, Marcel. But
Wrong, by the way, Christmas music shouldn't play until a week before Christmas.
oh no. So, but with that being said, Marcel, if people want to find out more about you, what you do, where can they go?
MarcelGagnè.com is a good place to go. Check out Free Thinker at Large on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Please do subscribe, share. And you can also go to cookingwithlinux.com if you don't want to hear me talk about all the other weird things I like to talk about and you want to just hang out with the Linux stuff. But my Cooking with Linux videos and my other stuff is also, like I said, and I'm WFTL, writer and Free Thinker at Large, Wooftle on Twitter.com, so twitter.com/WFTL.
All right, very well said. And everyone, thank you so much.